How are you doing? In recent years, we oftentimes see Japanese elderly workers everywhere in the city in Japan who work as a part-time worker. And they work in such a place like grocery store and McDonald's and a drugstore, a family restaurant chain, and Uber Eats or something like that. So when I see those people working in such a place with young people, even after retirement from the job that they have done for a long time in their life, I cannot help thinking that there is no comfortable retirement life for elderly people in Japan. This is the very first question that I come up with as soon as I see this situation where old people are forced to work for their living even after retirement in the Japanese society. So in Japan, people pay pension insurance to the Japanese government on a regular basis. And this is a civic duty regulated by a law that every single person in Japan must do. So if you pay pension insurance every time continuously without skipping, you can receive a pension from the government when you turn 60 years old in the future. So currently 30% of people in Japan is recipients of old age pension and survivor pension and disability pension, which is about 40 million people in Japan. So about 51% of elderly households in Japan make a living with a pension paid by the Japanese government. And according to the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, the average pension receiving amount was 60,000 yen, which is $452 per month from the National Pension Fund, and 144,000 yen, which is $1,086 from the Employees Pension Fund. Assuming that you can receive the pension benefits from both funds, you can receive total 200,000 yen, which is about $1,500. For your reference, I will explain the difference between national pension and employees' pension here. So national pension insurance is the one that every single Japanese national from 20 to 60 is obliged to take out. So national pension insurance premium rates is fixed principally for everyone. And in contrast, employees' pension insurance is the one that people working for a company take out through a company. So this is what is called a pension coverage system provided by each private companies in Japan, which you can receive additional pensions as an employee's pension in addition to the basic national pension paid by the Japanese government. Basically, circumstances of people who need to work even at the pension age all depends in Japan. But basically, there are roughly two types of people in Japan who are the one working for a living and the one working for just fulfillment in their life. But concretely, the number of people under suspension of pension payment from the government is about 400,000, which is about 1% of total pensioners, 27,010,000. And the number of people who receive a payment while working is 2,480,000, which is about 18% of total pensioners in Japan. So as one of the borderline of whether or not people can make a living in Japan, there is the social assistance payments, which is about 130,000 per month, which is as much as the minimum standard living the Japanese government legally set as in Japan. So if pension payment amount goes below this much, it is almost impossible for us to realize the minimum standard living in Japan. A normal pensioner who completely retired from work is entitled to receive a full amount of pension payment from the government. But a pensioner while working ends up receiving reduced amount of pension payment from the government or being under suspension of pension payment from the government. The Japanese government set the system that pension payment amount is reduced by stages in accordance with the amount of salaries that pensioners earn with work. This is because the Japanese government wants to regard working people as working generation with no retirement, no matter how old they are. So which means they are not still entitled to receive a pension payment from the government because they are not retired from work perfectly. So although people are forced to work for a living because of few pension payment from the government, thanks to this rule that the Japanese government set, people in poverty have to work more and more for their living. So it is putting a cart before the horse. In this April, public pension payment amount was lowered by 0.4% compared to that in last April. Moreover, in this April, the pension age was raised from 70 to 75 for those who were born after April 8, 1952. So if people older than 60 years old who have kept paying pension insurance work, the amount of pension they can receive is reduced in accordance with the amounts of salaries or bonus that they receive from where they work. So depending on the case, they are forced to be under suspension of pension payments from the government. The current Japan's pension insurance system is not based on the reserve financing scheme, but based on the system that young generations support current pensioners' financial resources. In short, simply speaking, young generation pay pension insurance that is now being paid to the old generation receiving a pension payment from the government. So now Japan is in the middle of declining birth rates and aging population, and generally speaking, this pension system is going to be ruined if the number of generations who pay pension insurance to the government goes below the number of people who receive pension payment from the government. So because simply the government can't secure the sufficient pension funds from people to cover the pension amount paid to the generation receiving a pension now. So anybody can understand this simple logic, right? So currently, Japan's public organization, the Japan Social Insurance System, manages a pension funds that they gather from people by investing stocks and forex and government bond to increase the asset in order to compensate for a shortage of a pension amount paid to all pensioners around Japan. However, no matter how seriously they manage pension funds in stock markets and forex markets, increment of funds with investments is not still enough to cover the pension amounts that will be paid to the future pensioners permanently in Japan. So that's why the government has no choice, but they raise the pension age and reduce the pension amount paid to pensioners and suspension of pension payment for working elderly people. So otherwise, pension funds resources will perfectly dry up in the early future, and trustability of pension fund management by the Japanese government is really, really low among young generation. For that reason, young people reject payment of a pension insurance that is even obligation for them, because they realize that even if they keep paying pension insurance on a regular basis continuously and they become a pension age in the future, they don't even know whether they can receive a pension from the government in the future while they are still alive. So one thing I can say for sure about this is that if my generation become a pension age, a pension receiving condition will be more tough than now. And the pension payment amount paid to us from the government will be certainly reduced, and the pension age will be certainly raised more than the current situation. So it is really it is not really strange that my pension may start being paid after my death in the future. So I think the position of pension insurance is not really different from taxation now, because there is no guarantee that the pension that I paid to the government is not returned back to me. So it is obvious that the situation of declining birth rate and aging population is ongoing in Japan. So realistically, if the government has an intention to keep supporting the current pension system, they have no choice, but they just adjust, like increasing the pension payment amount that they receive from young generation, and they reduce the pension payment amount paid to pensioners. So this is really unreasonable, though.